India is definitely not one of the richest countries in the world. However, I do know a lot of Indians who are some of the richest people in the world. There's something special about the Indian middle class and even the Indian rich. And I know for a fact as an Indian that we don't like to talk about this stuff. However, there are a couple of videos on YouTube that caught my attention. The first one was Humphrey Yang's The Chinese Secret to Saving Money, and the second one was Valuetainment's video on why Indian immigrants are some of the richest in the world. And I really enjoyed watching both of those videos, but I did realize that as a community, Indians are very shy and also very humble to talk about this stuff openly. However, growing up in India, I found that there were 7 specific open secrets that the Indian middle class and rich know about that ultimately leads to financial abundance. The first one is around dharma. I have spoken about dharma in a previous video. Dharma essentially means the nature of being. Dharma is also very closely associated with the Indian way of life. We typically think of ourselves as householders, and one of the critical things in the householder dharma is to add value to the world, and value makes money. So one of the primary objectives of the Indian householder is actually to make money, and this is a really interesting way of looking at money. If you are saying your nature is to make money, that is extremely powerful. And imagine if you are being born and raised in society knowing that your dharma is to make money. You could argue about it being right or wrong. I don't necessarily agree all the times on your purpose is to make money. However, that's something that is ingrained into our culture as Indians, as middle class Indians. The second one is around savings. India has a really strong savings rate. Even now, it's been decreasing over the years. However, we still have quite a strong savings rate, and this goes back to some of our ancient texts. For example, the Arthashastra, which literally translates into the book about money. And in Arthashastra, they talk all about savings. So again, savings is something that is ingrained into our minds from early on in life. The third one, and this is probably my most favorite one, is that Indians typically worship knowledge. And I have said on this channel various times that education is what will ultimately make you generational wealth. And this has been true in my family for generations. A lot of other families I know for generations as well. And think about this. We have a few interesting sayings. For example, Vidya Dhanam Sarva Dhanam, which means that the wealth of knowledge is the biggest wealth of them all. In my school, our motto was Amritam tu Vidya, which means that knowledge is the real nectar of life. And the Hindus in India have a lot of gods and goddesses, and goddess Saraswati is the goddess of knowledge. So when you are putting knowledge on a pedestal, there's very little that can be taken away from you, because you are always constantly learning, and learning adds value to yourself, and that you can give back to society. And the moment you create value in the society, you will never die hungry. The fourth one, and this is not only an Indian trait, this is probably more of a spiritual trait across the world, which is around generosity. Generosity is a part of our culture. We have a saying called Atithi Deva Bhava, which means that the guest is your God. So it doesn't matter if the guest is a monk or a homeless person or the richest person on the world, they should, in theory, get the same treatment. And therefore, generosity has always been a part of our culture. And generosity, in my opinion, builds huge abundance, because the moment you realize that you have enough, that you can share out with others, that is a revolution of abundance. You are really saying that I have enough. Now I have enough to share with you. And that's abundance. The fifth one is meditation or dhyana. In fact, in every Indian household, if you are Hindi speaking, you probably have heard something like dhyan se padho, means meditate on what you are reading, which really translates into being one with the subject of learning, being one with the subject of whatever you are doing, and putting your focus and attention on things. And when you have the ability to do that, and you've been taught to do that since childhood, you really have a superpower of focus, which is gradually becoming rare in our society. So I believe that people who have more focus today are actually more valuable in society going forward. Of course, there's the spiritual and the religious context of meditation. And since the time that I started my spiritual meditation, it actually has changed my life significantly for the better. 2x, 3x my income since before I started meditating, primarily because I have been able to learn learn like a sponge because meditation plays with the neuroplasticity of your brain, and also you start learning without judgment. And then of course you can approach life with a calm pair of eyes rather than being in this adrenaline rush all throughout. The next one is respect for wealth. So remember how I talked about this goddess of knowledge? We also have a goddess of wealth. The moment you have put wealth on a pedestal, that means that you have actually some respect for wealth, and therefore you don't hate wealth. There are a lot of people across the world who say that money is the cause of all evil in the world, and they have a lot of negativity around money. But as an Indian, if you have been brought up in the tradition, you would realize that actually, how can you be disrespecting money? You have already put so much of respect and responsibility on money to be able to take care of you. Of course, the goddess of money is really money. And of course, me being me who always puts knowledge on a higher pedestal than money, I say that unless you have Saraswati, you don't have Lakshmi either. Which means that unless you have generational knowledge, you probably will struggle to build generational wealth. And then the final thing that I think Indians are taught from a very young age is long-term thinking. We always hear stories about so-and-so person did XYZ and ended up in this life situation. So-and-so person did not do XYZ and ended up in that life situation. Oh, your dad did this, or your grandfather did this, or your great-grandfather did this, or look what your cousin's doing. So we always provide examples of other people. Now, you could be saying that this is building in comparisonitis, which is not great. However, what it really does, if you will look at it the right way, is also build in long-term thinking and taking in lessons from other people, trying to learn from other people's mistakes. And when you operate in that mindset, you are less likely to make mistakes. Not that there are any mistakes, there are only lessons in life, but you can approach your mistakes and you can approach life with that long-term vision. So those were the 7 open secrets that I have observed growing up in a middle-class India in helping us to build financial abundance. How about you? As an Indian, do you feel like I have missed something? Or if you have an Indian friend who has built substantial wealth for themselves, have you heard them say something that you can share with us in the comments below? Leave a comment below. I would be really so curious to find out more about everyone's perspectives. And if you don't agree with something, let me know in the comments below as well. And if you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing. It does help the channel out so much and actually motivates me to create more content like this for you. And if you enjoyed this video, you might enjoy something like this or this that I'll link up here. And I'll see you the next time. Bye.